Have you ever made bread using only the old dough from another bread you made? That's what we're gonna do today. This is baguette dough. I had extra dough when I was making it for my customers this week. Yeah, it smells pretty sour. It's been in the fridge since Friday. It's Monday today. And essentially, instead of using it to make an extra baguette, I just put it in the fridge. It grew quite a bit, it doubled. I have 334 grams here, and I'm gonna add equal amounts of flour. So we're gonna make it 670 grams about. Why am I using this amount? I don't know, I'm just winging it, we're figuring out. All right. Okay. All right, then we're gonna add warm water because that baguette pre-fermented dough, it was really cold. So if I add cold water, it's gonna take forever for this to go, even though I'm adding quite a bit of pre-fermented flour. Let's go ahead and just start with, I'm gonna do 200 grams of water. Yeah, that's nice and warm. And then I'm going to add, the baguette dough is already salted. So I only added 335 grams of flour, which means I'm only gonna add about 7 grams of salt. That's 2%, which is like the standard amount of salt that we add. Let's get my little mixer over here. It's an uni mixer, I'm really liking it. You could do this in a KitchenAid. You could also hand mix it. The reason I'm not hand mixing is that when you have a thick pre-ferment, like whatever's leavening your dough, if your starter is thick, whatever has the microorganisms in it is thick. So it's not a liquid starter. It's harder to knead it in by hand because you might have lumps of it and then it's not evenly distributed. So I'm gonna use my uni mixer. Kind of loud. I'm just gonna let it go until it's a nice smooth dough. I'm gonna show you. So I've given it a really good amount of mixing. You can definitely do this by hand. I just didn't want to deal with that stiff dough. Transfer this into this bowl. I'm actually gonna just very lightly oil it to help me get it out in the end. All right, just gonna take a second to tidy up my dough. Which is kind of like doing a stretch and fold. We're just bringing it together into a nice little ball. All right. It doesn't smell that sour, even though the pre-fermented flour that I used, or the pre-fermented dough that I used in here, was pretty sour smelling. So I'm interested to see how this comes out. I'm gonna keep it at about 78 to 80 degrees in my proofer so that it doesn't promote too much acidity and the yeast can really kickstart. If you keep it at too high of a temperature or too low, then that can turn it really sour. And since we have like 50% of the flour ratio is that pre-fermented dough, that was the baguette dough, I'm worried that this is gonna get really sour. So let's make this fermentation fast at the perfect yeast temperature, which is 78 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. When I come back in about half an hour, definitely want to give it some folds because it's not super strong right now. Let's see what happens. Me being me, I completely forgot to fold this. So now it's been over an hour and it's just been sitting here, but that's okay. Who's stressed about sourdough? I'm not. You shouldn't be. If you're stressed about your sourdough, you're doing something wrong. I mean, that's actually not true. Sometimes it can be a little stressful, but don't let it ruin your day. So you remember, I only added 50% water because we used so much of that dough that was already a wet dough. So I'm just kind of moving it around. I guess you couldn't call this a coil fold or a stretch and fold. The only thing you want to make sure to do when you're doing these folds is not tear your dough and stretch out that gluten. The gluten is almost like a sea urchin or like a turtle. You poke it and it goes, and then it slowly relaxes back down. When you do your fold, you just want to make sure that the gluten has relaxed so that you can tighten it back up. The more that you strengthen this gluten, the more it'll be able to hold up the bubbles while it's baking. So, I mean, I don't think I'm going to give this one any more folds. I think it's fine. I'm going to let it sit in a warm spot, and then I'm going to shape it, and we're going to bake it tomorrow like a loaf. It's looking pretty good. A good step bigger than it was. Since I fermented it at such a high temperature, like I was keeping it in my proofer really warm, and we used so much of that dough that already was fermented. Figure it's time to cut it off now. Doing what I just did, kind of pushing that in there, will really help the dough cleanly release from the bowl. So since I also put flour on the top surface, it's not going to stick to my bench. See? So I have such a busy street. We're going to pull in the sides. I like to pull this in here to make sure that there's not like an air pocket right there. And I like to gently, using the right here of my hand, just like to roll it. So when you shape your dough, it's a chance to really, connect with the dough and feel where it's at. If at this stage it feels really strong, which this dough does, it's not like tearing on me, it's not deflating, it's not spreading really fast. Since it feels pretty strong and it's holding shape well, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it at room temperature for another 30, 45 minutes before I put it into the fridge. If at this point it was spreading and hard to manage and started to stress me out, I would put it right in the fridge and maybe even bake it tonight. But this dough is looking good. I've never done this before, so we're just gonna have to see how it turns out. Hopefully it's a pretty loaf tomorrow, and I'll bake it with you tomorrow. It's the next day. I didn't get to baking the loaf this morning. It's like 1:30 in the afternoon. I did cover this loaf overnight in the fridge. When to cover, when to not cover. Generally, I don't cover my loaves. When I am worried that they're not quite there, they're not totally bulk fermented right, I feel like they could puff up a little. Covering your loaf in the fridge means that it takes it a longer time to cool down to the fridge temperature from room temperature. So when you cover it, you're buying yourself a little more fermentation time. Looks pretty good. I'm really stoked to see how this loaf comes out. If it has a nice spring, it's pretty low hydration, so we'll see what that crumb looks like, and hopefully it's the right amount of salt too. So I'm excited. I swear that smoke is still from the flipping croissant loaf. Just open up a window. Oh, window's open. Come on, get out of here. All right. Pretty good. I'll let you watch me squirt. Honestly, I think we're all obsessed with it because you never know how it's gonna look. Even if you know it'll come out really good, there's just something so suspenseful and wonderful about lifting that Dutch oven. So let's see. pretty good. It does feel kind of heavy, so I'm not expecting it to have a very open crumb, especially since it's super low hydration. Like, I only added 200 grams of water. I don't know, it smells really good. Gotta wait to cut it open a little bit though. But it's still a little warm, but I want to cut into it, so we're going to. Me first. Pretty good. This loaf was made with 0 starter, only dough that I used to make baguettes that was left over. Went in the fridge for 3 days, took it out of the fridge, mixed it with some water, salt, more flour, and here's what we got.